Good afternoon and welcome to the David Ige 2.0 live statewide conversation with David Ige. This is Melly James and I'll be your host for the event. It's so excited to use technology to connect people with Senator David Ige, our candidate for governor. We'll have people from across the islands all together interacting and having David answer your questions, and you'll be giving live feedback. Good afternoon. Okay. From now until the official start time, I'll be explaining how to get logged in and ready to participate. We'll get familiar with Live Sift, the interactive software that we'll be using today. You'll also be able to start submitting questions for David and topics of interest to you. So let's get started. Since you're listening to me right now on the live stream, you're obviously on the website, which is davidige.org/connectup. Okay. This is Information Central for the David Ige 2.0 project, with all the instructions on it. The ideal way to participate is to use two devices. One is your computer, which you'll be watching me on the live stream. The second will be your smartphone, where you'll be going to your browser to www.livesift.com. If you prefer and feel comfortable with viewing the entire event from your computer with a web browser, you can have two browser windows open, one for the streamcast and one for inputting your questions and giving responses. I will help walk you through the setup process. Okay, so now you're obviously at davidige.org/connectup, and you've already accomplished step one. Next, we will get you set up on your smartphones. If you do not have a smartphone, you can enter your questions and responses from your computer. If you don't have either, you can follow along with others at your viewing site. Now open the browser on your smartphone. Okay, are you with me? Good, now go to www.livesift.com. This is the advanced technology system we'll be using today to gather your real-time questions and responses from across the islands and with other participants on the mainland. Okay, do you see where it says enter participant code? I'd like you to enter today's meeting code, which is David Ige Live. This is not case sensitive. This will get you into the event. Okay, now you're all in Live Sift and you'll be asked a couple of easy preliminary questions. One is your zip code, which we'll display in a few minutes. And next you'll see a box to enter questions you might have for David and topics you're interested in. For example, the economy, education, and the environment. Please enter any topics you would like David Ige to address in less than 140 characters and hit the send button. We will be collecting your questions and topics here up until the 4 p.m. start, which we're already at, so I guess we're going to start live now. We will also be collecting questions throughout the rest of the discussion today. All right, that's all there is to participating in the David Ige 2.0 statewide conversation. I want to also note that the social media hashtag for this event is #DavidIgeLive. In today's event, you will participate probably much more than at a regular in-person event with David. David will be live on your screen, but you'll have continued opportunities to respond using a smartphone or other devices. There are limitations for sure, but I think you'll be surprised at the level of interaction we'll have. From now, we'll be explaining how to get logged in and get ready to participate. We'll get familiar with Live Sift, the interactive software, and you'll be able to start submitting questions now. So let's get started. Since you've tuned in to this live stream, you're at the David Ige 2.0 website. And now we're going to take a small break and watch a few David Ige commercials, and then we'll get started.
This election is about the future of Hawaii. It's about the future that you want to leave to your children and your children's children. As Shannon and I has traveled around the state, we've heard many, many times, you want a governor who listens, who's willing to be respectful and hear your views and hear your concerns. Most importantly, you want a governor who will bring our communities together, find common ground, and find solutions that move our communities forward. You know, I'm the only candidate standing before you that has served as chairman of the Ways and Means. I've been through every line item in the budget, the $12 billion state budget that drives our public schools, our universities, our libraries, agriculture, everything under the sun. I'm the only candidate here that has said no to raising taxes and made the tough choices. I've cut $1 billion out of the governor's request and found ways to make it happen. I found a way to fund and preserve Turtle Bay in a way that didn't burden the taxpayer, because I know how important it is to all of you that we preserve those pristine lands that mean so much to you and I, so that our children and our children's children will have those opportunities to go for a walk or a hike along the shoreline on the North Shore. Those are about priorities, and those are the priorities that I bring to the table. I'm the only candidate with 35 years of private sector experience. Yeah, I've never been a CEO. I never pretended to be. I'm an engineer. It's about finding solutions. It's about hearing your concerns and finding the best opportunities. You know, we figure things out. That's what engineers do. I will be a governor who will do the right thing the right way. With your help, Shannon and I are excited about the opportunity to take the reins of state government and drive it to where you want to be.
Growing up like David Ige did in a working class family, this is personal for him. David has a deeply genuine commitment to helping Hawaii families. As a father of 3, David Ige is fighting to create opportunities that keep our children here. David is in this for the right reasons. I'm Dan Akaka, and I'm voting for David Ige.
Welcome to the David Ige 2.0 live statewide conversation with our candidate for governor, David Ige. We're here in the ThinkTech studio in Honolulu, and you are all spread out across the islands and some of you on the mainland. Thank you for participating and joining us earlier to get logged in and settled to begin this event. If you missed the login instructions, they are available near the bottom of the webpage you're looking at, davidige.org/connectup. If at any time you're having technical problems, send us an email to connectup@davidige.org, and we'll see if our tech team can help. Quick reminder, the ideal way to participate is to use 2 devices, one to watch the live stream and the other to enter your questions and responses at livesif.com. If not, you can make 2 windows on your web browser and watch the live stream in one window and respond at the LiveSif site in the other. I want to also note that the social media hashtag for this event is #DavidIgeLive. David Ige has long championed the use of technology at the legislature, as well as recognizing technology as an important sector of our economy. It's so exciting to see David use technology to connect with people. Earlier, I explained the program and the importance of your participation, so let's get started. All right, so David Ige is here sitting next to me, and I'd like to give him an idea of who's in this town hall. Now, I'll ask you 2 questions, and you can respond on the LiveSif screen using the device you've chosen for making LiveSif responses. How many men and women are here? Connect it up. Looking at your LiveSif screen, enter your response. Okay, a few more seconds. So enter your response now. Gotta get connected up here. Looks like we've got a 50-50 male to female distribution. Oh, it's exciting. I'm trying to turn this thing on. Okay. Okay. Oh, looks like we've got slightly more male. Okay, that's great. Now, how many people are gathered? How many people are gathered at your site? Enter your answer now. Many of you are in front of your computer holding your smartphone. Some of you are gathered in small groups, and I know there are a few large gatherings, like at the Honolulu, Maui, and Hilo Ige campaign headquarters. Last call, enter your response now. You have 5 different choices to choose from. Okay, looks like the most we have here are people with 1 or 2 to 3 people, but we also have 16% that have groups of 10 plus people. That's awesome. Now I'd like to introduce Senator David Ige, our candidate for governor. David?
Oh, aloha. I'm glad to be here this afternoon. You know, I have been an advocate for use of technology to really allow the public to engage in the process, and this is an exciting opportunity for us to try something new.
Senator Ige, before we got started, the participants were asked to submit topics of interest, and this kind of happened while they're also inserting questions. So from this input, we created the top topics of interest, where people are asked now to rank them 1 through 6. What is a priority for you? So before you hit send, make sure you can rate them 1 through 6, and then hit send, and that'll submit it for you. So if you go to your smartphone, computers, you can start voting. Okay. So the reason we're ranking the topics is to help guide the selection of questions that David will answer in today's program. We're going to close the ranking, so press the send button now. So it looks here like education and economy are the top 2, kind of going back and forth. Environment and energy. So I think those are the top 3 we're looking at. Health is slightly lower than agriculture, aging issues, and other. Others, basically, if there's anything on here that isn't one of your topics of interest. At the pre-show, many of you sent in questions that you wanted David to answer. But if you haven't, we'll be taking questions throughout the show, and David will answer directly. If you look at your live stream screen, you can type in a question now. Okay. Great. For the next 40 minutes or so, we'll try to have David answer as many of your questions as possible. So David will be answering your questions, and he'll be trying to keep his responses short so that we can try to get to as many as possible. And we'll be rating those based on the topics of interest that you all have rated as your highest. Selections will be guided by the topics and a word cloud of questions submitted. Due to time constraints, his answers will have to be brief. So now let's take a look at the most important topics you want to address today. Okay. Okay, so why don't we get to the first question here. So David, the first question that I have is, I'm going to ask for you to highlight 1 to 2 highlights of the role of technology in your legislative career, and also what your thoughts are on the event that we're doing today.
Sure, I'd be happy to. As many of you do know, I am an electrical engineer by profession, and so I have spent a lot of time trying to bring my private sector experiences into the state capitol. So, you know, a lot of it was just when I first got into the legislature, I was actually shocked at how far behind the legislature was in terms of use of technology. So I've been a real big proponent of just using technology to reach out. You know, we started a number of issues that was really focused on broadening public participation in the legislative process, and we did it on a couple of different areas. You know, obviously the most obvious was to use technology to provide copies and access to legislative documents. So that's bills and resolutions and those things that are really fundamental to the legislative process. So ensuring that the public could get access to copies of bills as we were voting on them. That really gave birth to the website, and as you know, and many of the viewers that are logged in and engaged this afternoon, we've won national awards for our website in how much information we provide, how we have worked really hard to use different kinds of technologies, accepting email, faxing, a wide variety of different ways that the public can submit legislation or submit testimony online. So, you know, it really was about recognizing the fact that technology would allow us to make it easier for the public to engage. This past session, Senator Tokuda in the Education Committee was allowing for Skype and video conference testimony. I know that it is expensive for neighbor island members to participate in the legislative process, and we wanted to experiment with video conferencing as a way to allow the public to comment without actually flying into Honolulu. So, you know, we have been looking at different ways. I think that the legislature has led by example in terms of use of technology to really allow the public to engage more easily with the legislative process.
Thank you. While David is answering the question, you'll have a chance to rate his response. We'll ask the question, what do you think of the answer? The choices have been excellent, strongly agree, agree, undecided, disagree, and strongly disagree. And you can enter your ratings at any time. We'll give you at least up to 10 seconds after David ends to submit your rating. Okay, so now I think we're going to get into our first participant question. It seems here that in terms of a lot of people are agreeing with your response. So it's good.
That's a good, safe place to start.
Okay, here's the first question. Could Senator Ige elaborate on how he intends to re-engineer state government, to make state government leaner, more efficient, and to install an accountability system?
Thank you for that question. I do think it actually begins with technology. For more than 20 years now, I've advocated for establishing a chief information officer or chief technology officer, whatever specific title you want to apply to that position. And finally, 3 years ago, we created that position. We have appropriated funding for two very important projects. You know, I've always believed that state employees are committed professionals, but they don't have the tools that allows them to do their job in a way that they can be more efficient and effective. I've always believed, been one to lead by example, and you know, I think the Senate in going paperless really has been a leader in use of technology to do their job. I do believe that there are opportunities all across state government to be similar, and it begins with making investments in the technology infrastructure of state government. So the two big projects I think that are the highest priority that I would pursue, and we've already implemented the bulk of the funds that are required to execute the projects, is the enterprise resource management system, and that would be a financial management, a budgeting system, and then really an actual accounting financial management system, and the HR piece of that. So the human resource, I think that that's the core systems of state government. And a lot of those systems today are on antiquated platforms, manufactured, discontinued hardware and software. So it definitely would be a step up for all of state government. And I think what that would allow us to do, I do believe that a prime component of the transformation really would be centered on transparency. You know, I've been an advocate for all of my career about more transparency in government. I do believe that once we fix the core IT systems, that we could use these systems to provide more transparency and accountability for government. You know, for example, we do talk a lot about how long it takes government to execute contracts, for example, with private companies or nonprofits in the safety net programs, for example. And I think that if we move to our budgeting and we upgrade the budgeting and the financial management system, then we could actually establish dashboards and mechanisms so that we could provide access to the public to exactly where those requests or contracts are in the process, that would allow shedding more light if it's if many contracts are being hitting a roadblock in the same area, then at least we would know where we need to apply more resources or where we need to focus more attention in terms of getting the work done. So I think that that's just one example. I think that there will be many opportunities.
Okay, thank you. The looks here, we had 57% strongly agree, 30% agree, so that's a good part of the pie here. So yeah, please don't forget to rate his response while David is answering the question. Now we'll be asking questions that you have submitted during the program. Again, the selection of the questions are based on those that seem repeated the most or similar, and the ranking of topics is factored into the selections. We haven't found technology that will automate this function, so our volunteers are doing their best. Also, for those who provide their email address later, we'll send you all the questions so that you know which questions have been submitted. So the second question is, what are David's thoughts on climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, and the role of state planning in education, environment, and the economy, as well as other initiatives?
Thank you very much for that question. You know, this past session, the legislature did take action to establish an interagency task force on climate change. And I think this is the first time that we've actually appropriated funds to a work group that whose job really is to evaluate all of the policies and programs within state government and begin the process of trying to see what areas we need to focus on to make changes to state policies that are impacted by climate change, rising sea levels, and all of those kinds of things. So the purpose of the task force really is to reach out to county, state, and federal government to really begin the conversation of which specific regulations, rules, laws, policies need to be modified in light of climate change, and then allowing for prioritization and at least beginning to scope out what areas need to be considered and which areas would be of highest priorities. You know, for example, and we've talked a lot informally and anecdotally about the notion that so much of our housing is along the shoreline. And if in fact climate change is occurring and we do expect a significant change in sea level rise, you know, let's say 10 feet, then how does that impact setbacks, shoreline setbacks, and
what the planning guidelines are, what the interagency requirements would be, to what policies would have to be changed in light of a rising sea level and the fact that the shoreline would be moving. So I think that that's what the task that we're asking the interagency work group to do. It's beginning to identify all of the different rules, laws, regulations in state and county government that would have to be updated in light of the fact that you know, we do expect global warming is occurring. We do expect that the shoreline would be moving and that the sea level would be rising.
Don't forget to rate David's answers here on livesif.com. Looks like we've got about 50% in agreement, 28 strongly agree, 11% undecided, 8 strongly disagree, and 3% disagree.
Well, I think that's, you know, I do think that that's helpful feedback. You know, I do know that when we considered the legislation, you know, we know that there are lots of variables that are currently before government agencies about really what the impact would be. And this interagency group is really the first step. And it really is trying to get the work organized, trying to identify all the different areas that we might need to do further work. So I'm not surprised that, you know, it's kind of 50% in support and there's lots of unknown, because there is a lot of issues that we don't know about. You know, the intent of the task force was really to take a first step to try to organize all of the issues so that we could develop a more specific plan about how state government would go about trying to address sea level rise and global warming.
Okay. Thank you, David. So our next question up is, I would like to see Ige address his stance on Common Core standards.
Okay. Thank you. As for those of you who may not know what Common Core standards are, it really is a part of the education effort driven by the federal government. Common Core is a common set of performance standards primarily focused on reading and mathematics that the federal government has encouraged all states to adopt as kind of a baseline. So for me personally, I just believe that education reform really is about empowering schools and allowing those professionals and communities closest to the children to make the most important decisions about how best to improve public education. And as part of that, I really believe that the more resources we can deliver to the school level, the more authority principals, teachers, community members at the school level have over what changes should be made or how the budget should be spent, I think the quicker we will see improvement in the public education system. So in regards to Common Core, I am concerned in a couple things. The department and the board has really started to do more centralized decision making. You know, they've ordered common schedules, they've ordered purchase of specific textbooks, they've ordered more and more activity as requirements from the state level rather than empowering schools to make decisions, and Common Core was one of those things. I believe that Common Core is a starting point, that it, you know, when I think about it, I just see so much that's different in most of the schools in our communities. You know, if you look at the elementary level, the needs of a school in IAEA, elementary school in IAEA, would be very different than the needs of an elementary school in Kailua or versus elementary school in Waianae or Lanai or the Big Island, for example. And the interests of the children would be very different. So I've always believed that Common Core is kind of a starting point for schools to get alignment of what they're teaching. But I've always believed that schools should be empowered to make adjustments to that Common Core in a way that allows them to ensure that the school meets the needs of that community.
Well, remember to vote on David's response to this question during his answer. Looks like you had about 90% or close to 90% of agreement
Oh,
for
okay.
that one.
I guess I'm doing better.
Okay, so our next participant question is, what is your take on the state lowering University of Hawaii's budget?
You know, the budget is always a challenge. We begin with the requirement that our Constitution requires a balanced budget, and unlike the federal government, we're not in position to print money and you know, raise the debt ceiling and go into debt. So we always work very hard to manage the resources that we have. I do know when we were coming off of the recession that we did have to cut budgets across many departments. But I do know the last 2 years we've actually added additional dollars to the university's budget. And so I'm not exactly certain what the frame of reference is in terms of budget cuts being made to the university's budget. You know, I do know we do have autonomy for the university, and the university does have the ability to move monies around. The state legislature appropriates monies into Manoa campus and then community colleges and then West Oahu and UH Hilo. But within those appropriations, the university does have the autonomy to make decisions about priorities. So overall, we've actually increased funding to the University of Hawaii. You know, different campuses might have been impacted differently, and you know, so I'm not exactly certain what specifically the viewer or the participant is referring to.
Don't forget to rate David's answer during his response. Seems here you've got actually quite about 25% undecided,
Okay.
but a good 70% in agreement.
Okay. Yeah, and you know, it is one of those that we have given the university autonomy, so they do have the ability to move. You know, we appropriate sums in lump sum, and the university does have the flexibility to move it. And you know, I think if there was a specific concern about a specific program, I think I could respond more specifically to the question. So maybe that's something we could ask the participant to be a little more specific.
Good idea. Okay. So our next question is, how can we make sure our keiki in public schools get better education?
Thank you very much. You know, again, I really believe it's about empowering schools and getting resources to the school level and letting them make decisions. And you know, and I'll just give you kind of one example of what I mean when I say that it's really about getting decision making and authority to the school level and getting the resources and letting them make a decision. I had talked with teachers at one of the schools that was selected to participate in this new digital device initiative. And they were excited at first about the opportunity for them to get a device, whether it's an iPad or a laptop, for every child at the school. And in fact, the devices show up right before the end of last school year in November kind of time frame. But the school didn't have a say. I mean, they were happy to be participants and they were happy to receive the devices. But there was no preparation on the school's part. They hadn't discussed curriculum materials. They hadn't discussed how the school would change with the fact that every student now has a device. So they decided that even though the devices showed up at their campus, that they're not ready to implement. They didn't have training for teachers. They didn't discuss the changes. So I would just ask the public, would you purchase a device, an iPad or a laptop, and have it sit for 6 months until you could get, because the teachers aren't trained, the systems aren't in place, so that the devices arrive on campus, it sits in the boxes, it's waiting for teachers to be trained, and then the teachers are trained in the summer, and then they get access to the devices. It doesn't make sense to me, and I wouldn't purchase a device, have it sit in the box for 6 months, and then train up the teachers, and then and then try and implement something. I would have trained the teachers first, and then buy the devices, and then and then you can implement. Clearly, I do believe that some of those devices might be obsolete before the training was implemented. So it's just those kinds of things to me that if in fact the money was given to the school and they could decide how they would spend it and what the sequence would be, and I'm certain that the principals and teachers there would make the decision that they're not going to buy the devices until they're at the point of being ready to implement. And like I said, I think that's just one example of top-down. So I really believe it's about giving the school level people the authority, giving them control of the resources so that they can make decisions about when to buy devices. They can make sure that training is completed with the teachers and the staff. They can be certain that they've restructured what they do in a way to maximize the learning opportunities from any digital devices, rather than laptops showing up or iPads showing up with no connection or correlation with the teachers and principals at the school level.
Great, thank you, David. Well, it looks like you have a large amount of people agreeing. So let's see, the next question is, broadband in Hawaii. We are lagging behind and hindering innovation. What are your plans to address a lack of reliable, affordable access?
I would say it's focused in two areas. We have really made a push to make public libraries and public schools kind of the access for broadband availability. I think it's kind of a balancing act. We definitely want the private sector to drive a lot of when investments are made and how high-speed, lower-cost broadband would be rolled out to the communities. But I do believe that there's value in pushing broadband access to all of the public facilities, because that would assure that high-speed access is available. When you look at where the public schools are and where the public libraries are, collectively they touch virtually every community all across the state. So I've been a big supporter of the BTOP grant, which was a grant that the state and public libraries and the university got. And what that really drove was gigabit access to public schools and public libraries all across the state. Fiber-driven. Fiber was the connection medium of preference. And can you imagine if each community school had a gigabit of broadband access, then you do know that the technology would be at least available in each and every community. So I think that that's what the state, from a policy perspective, can do to drive broader broadband across the state in each and every community. Beyond that, I think it's about supporting businesses and encouraging them to get involved and engaged. I do believe we see more competition with wireless providers and cable TV and hardwired cable providers, and so I think that competition is a good thing. So it really is kind of a combination of ensuring that the state is driving demand when they can in a responsible way, and then working with the private sector to be able to provide those services that the public demands.
Thank you. All right, so we have our next question coming up. How do you intend to resolve the homeless issues in Kaka'ako?
You know, homelessness has become a statewide challenge, I think, for all of our communities. And there is no magic bullet, or there's no quick fix. You know, there are 30% more homeless in Hawaii today statewide than there were 4 years ago. And when I meet and talk with people all across the state, there's homeless in each and every community. So, you know, what we have been focused on is really a collaborative, collective effort. It really means getting all of government involved, federal, state, and county levels of government, and the private sector and community organizations as well. You know, the model that we have been focused on is this concept of housing first, that you want to get homeless people into an emergency housing program, and rather than really, you know, using fire hoses and washing them out of the parks in different communities, I really believe that it will take being able to find private sector partners in each and every community to begin to identify emergency shelters so that we can provide housing in virtually every community. And the Housing First program really focuses, or tries to focus our efforts on those homeless that are most motivated to leave the state of homelessness. So it would be people who have jobs, and they just may not be earning enough to be able to afford rents. And so focusing on those people, identifying what other services they need to be able to earn enough income so that they can leave the state of homelessness. On the state level, you know, it could be mental health services, because we provide mental health services to those in our communities who can't afford it. It could be substance abuse services. Some of these homeless people may have gotten into drug abuse issues and would need to have substance abuse treatment services. It could be health services. They may be uninsured now and need access to federally qualified health centers so that they can get some health concerns taken care of. You know, it also could deal with federal benefits. 10% of the homeless are veterans and are entitled to a wider range of veterans benefits. And if we find out that that homeless person is a veteran, then we need to align and help them get access to the federal benefits that they would be entitled to. So I'm convinced that it has to be a comprehensive program, working with public-private partnerships in the communities, focused on housing first and shelter, providing wraparound services that state, federal, or county might, and even engage the private sector. You know, I know that proposals have been made by community members, businesses, wanting to be able to pay for return plane tickets, for example. If someone has come to Hawaii in the incorrect belief that it's easier to be homeless in Hawaii with no real connection to family or other support systems, find themselves in Hawaii homeless without sufficient funds to get home. You know, I support working with private sector to identify those people, make sure that they really do have a connection and have the potential of being able to be successful in getting out of the state of homelessness on the mainland, and then really provide for their transportation so they can return home and hopefully get better family support or other kinds of support that would allow them to be moved from being homeless in their home state, or at least a state with other relatives.
Thank you, David. So it looks here we had about 80% in agreement and about 20% either undecided or in disagreement.
Well, you know, I would say that the homeless issue is something that comes up in every coffee hour that I have across the state. So it definitely is something that is on top of mind with a lot of people across the state. and it is a huge problem. I think everybody recognizes that it's a huge challenge for our communities, and I think that there's general agreement that we all have to work together to tackle it.
Okay, thank you. So the next participant question is, thank you. Are you fully committed to ensuring the success of the Turtle Bay Conservation Agreement during your term as governor?
Thank you very much for that question. You know, I was, you know, just kind of taking a step back and talking about Turtle Bay. You know, I have been working with Senator He and members of the Land Trust for Public Lands, and really looking for ways to preserve a lot of that land from Cavella Bay over to Kahuku Point. You know, and we have for at least the last 3 years looking at different opportunities, different ways that we could ensure that those pristine locations would not be developed. When the agreement was announced to fund the conservation easement at the end of session, it was I working with Senator Kidani, who really oversees the CIP budget. We knew that we had a challenge. It came so late in session. We were looking for different opportunities. The challenge really was that we had a lot of conversations about which community-based projects we would fund at that point. And the challenge was that the construction budget already was $200 million more than we could afford to implement. So we were looking at a creative way to fund the Turtle Bay easement acquisition, and we have been talking for at least the last 3 years about refinancing the debt on the convention center. So it was a natural win-win to me for us to use the opportunity to refinance the convention center debt, to recognize that we would save money in the debt service, commit a portion of that to operations at the convention center, use a portion of that to acquire the easement. And over the last 3 years, we have made a concerted effort to really ensure that there's more synergy and more joint investment of hotel room tax dollars into infrastructure that allows our communities to see a better quality of life. You know, and this Turtle Bay easement was just one more project, I think, that clearly demonstrated that there's a link between our visitor industry and making public improvements for important infrastructure. In addition, the specific Turtle Bay easement, again, to use hotel room taxes to ensure forever that Cavella Bay to Kahuku Point would remain in a pristine way, and then most importantly, assure public access. So yes, I am committed in my term to make sure that we can execute and make good on the conservation easement at Turtle Bay. One of the requirements we have in that bill that the House and Senate agreed to was that there needs to be an access plan. You know, we want to assure that if we are paying $40 million for the easement, that we be certain that the public will have access to it, that there'll be sufficient investment in other infrastructure, parking and other amenities that would make sure that the public would not only get access to those lands, but would have the kinds of infrastructure that would make it enjoyable to walk, hike, and do all of those kinds of things to enjoy access to the parcels.
Okay, thank you. Our next participant question is coming up in a moment. Here we go. What do you mean by giving more autonomy to school principals? Could principals mandate teaching of intelligent design or drop athletics?
I think that teaching intelligent design is different than athletics. So let me just kind of parse it. No, there needs to be statewide standards in terms of content of what would be taught. And so there wouldn't be carte blanche for the principals and teachers at a school to include things that are not part of the base standards. So no, be, um, they wouldn't have the option of including those kinds of curriculum that um, are kind of outside of the standard per se. They could add other things, um, that might be appropriate, but I don't believe that intelligent design would be part of that. Um, the athletics is a separate issue because we've already allowed schools to make some choices about athletics, about whether they want to spend money in athletics or not. For example, not every school has a football team, and so part of it is really working and ensuring that there are students that would be interested in pursuing some of these activities. But the school actually would have the authority to decide if they do have athletics at the high school level, and if they do, what sports that they would want to participate in. So I think it's empowering the schools to really make those decisions, having core standards that would define what the minimum standard might be, and empowering schools to add additional requirements as they, believe is important to the communities.
Great, thank you. Our next participant question is, what will you do to support infrastructure for agricultural development?
Thank you very much for that question as well. I really believe that we've talked a lot about sustainability in the last 5-10 years, but we haven't really put forward a specific action plan about how to increase food production, for example. I will be working with farmers and those in the ag industry because, for example, I think we should talk about what would it take to double the production of the food that we produce. We do produce beef and livestock. And if you were to just generically ask the question, okay, so what would it take to double, whatever we're producing today? And then we could identify and work with the farming community all across the islands, on each island, and take those inputs and begin to prioritize and put a price tag on what that would be. And sometimes it may mean access to more lands, and we would have to do the inventory and try and find out whether state has lands that it could make available. Sometimes it might involve private lands, but at least if we could identify what actions are required, then we could develop a longer term plan and prioritize and work with the farmers. And it could be making development of ag parks a priority, so that farmers who produce lettuce or other kinds of things for consumption really need access to more lands. I have heard that a big part of producing more of what we eat is really limited by food safety and security. There's been a significant change at the federal level. A lot of the small farmers especially need assistance with complying with food safety and security standards. And I believe it does entail working with the Department of Agriculture, trying to get the department to be more supportive of small farmers, trying to look at defining programs of how to support small farmers. It's a couple other things, and I'll just give you a couple of examples. We've talked a lot about sustainability and supporting agriculture, but the Department of Education has virtually shut down all ag programs in virtually all the schools across the state. I don't know if it makes sense for us. I don't believe every school needs to have an ag program, but I do believe some schools should have very active programs. And off the top of my head, I know, for example, Lahaina Luna would want to continue to have a very active agriculture program. I've talked with many of the students and teachers on Lanai and Molokai that it does make sense in these rural communities, and there are communities on the Big Island. We talk about the Big Island maybe being the breadbasket of Hawaii, being able to produce a lot of the food for consumption. We need to work with the schools. on the Big Island to ensure that our students have active ag programs and 4-H clubs and those kinds of things, so that students can really get an idea of what it means to be a farmer, or what it takes to be a successful farmer. And then finally, you know, the University of Hawaii has really significantly reduced the College of Tropical Agriculture in their support for farmers all across the state. You know, we talk about sustainability, but the Department of Education, University are cutting the programs that support agriculture. You know, we really need to reverse that. We need to make significant investments, I think, in the College of Tropical Agriculture. We need to have extension agents at the university that can be working with farmers and help them to be more productive. You know, they need to understand the newest propagation techniques, the kinds of things that can help them be more productive, can help them be better and more efficient farmers in traditional and organic methods, or different methods to produce the food that we eat. And so it's kind of a comprehensive plan on all fronts, working with farmers, working with the department to ensure the high schools that have or want a future in agriculture have programs. Is working at the University of Hawaii to ensure that there's support for farmers, especially small farmers, to allow them to learn the newest techniques and bring it to their farm so that they can be more productive.
Great, well, thank you. That was our last participant question. And thank you very much, Senator Ige, for answering our participants' questions. This concludes the question and answer portion of the program.
Oh, thank you very much. Very interesting exercise. I appreciate all of you who took the time to tune in and send your responses as we've kind of worked through them.
The purpose of the David Ige 2.0 project is to connect people in the community from across the islands with David Ige, our candidate for governor. Now, we'd like to ask you, the participants, to give us some feedback on today's event. I'll be asking you 3 questions. And before then, we'll close with an option to submitting your name and email address. The first question is, what do you think about this event? You can respond now via Live Sift by selecting excellent, good, okay, not to my liking. You can also send comments about today's event to connectup@davidige.org. The second question is, should we do another event before Election Day? You can respond now by choosing yes, no, or maybe. Let's see if these come in. We've got 95% saying yes so far. As of right now, it looks like most of you said yes. In anticipation of a favorable response to this question, the campaign has tentatively scheduled another event. I've just been told that here at the campaign, we've made a snap decision and will in fact go ahead with another David Ige 2.0 event. I can officially announce here that the David Ige for Governor campaign will hold another David Ige 2.0 live statewide conversation. It will be held on Sunday, October 26th from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. You are all invited back, and we'll get to more questions for David. We also ask that you spread the word and invite friends. Very shortly, we'll have new information posted on the campaign website about the event at davidige.org/connectup. Great. Let's see here. So the idea for David Ige 2.0 event came from the David Ige 505 project to have many people make small $5.05 donations, up to $95.05. The 5 cents added is the project identifier. David wants to engage with us, with as many people as possible, because that's what's kept him connected to the community. I have an invitation for you, framed as a question. Will you help fund this and the next event with a $5.05 donation? You can say yes, no, maybe, or I'll donate more than $5.05. I'll give you a moment to respond. Oh, looking good. We've got 40% at yes, 30% at I'll donate more. At rally.org/David Ige 505, some people have donated $15.05, $25.05, or more. Just to let you know, if you donate $5.05 or up to $95.05, your donation may be matched 1-to-1 as we qualify in the state's partial public funding program. That's because David has agreed to a spending limit set by the Campaign Spending Commission. Right now, the polling software doesn't give us numbers for each choice, only percentages, but it looks like, let's see here, 35% of you have said yes, 30% have said I'll donate more, and 22 no, and 13 maybe. That's great.
Terrific.
We'll check in later for the final results. After the event, I invite you to donate $5.05 and up to $95.05 at rally.org/David Ige 505. Don't forget now. I have a final item for you for today's event. If you enter your name and email address now on the Live SIFT screen, we will send you information on the October 26th event. The URL address can be seen at davidige.org/connectup. You can also comment on today's event by email to connectup@davidige.org. While we give you time to do this, I have a housekeeping announcement. In consultation with the Campaign Spending Commission, we would like to recommend that expenses for coffee hour type gatherings for today's event be reported to the Ige campaign. You can do this by downloading the in-kind donation form that's on the Connect Up website, which is davidige.org/connectup. The Campaign Spending Commission says that if you were with someone else during the event, the Ige campaign must report the campaign gifts you gave to them. We're taking a strict interpretation of the law, so we feel obligated to ask you to fill out the downloadable in-kind donation form on the Connect Up website. You may have been too busy responding on LiveSIFT to have refreshments, but if you did, you'll need to report these to the uploaded donation. Thank you. Okay, we're near the end of the program. I'll ask Senator Ige for some closing remarks. But before that, I'd like to express my appreciation to David for allowing me to be your host today. I've had a lot of fun and really enjoyed hearing your responses and getting the live feedback from the participants. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Melly. I really do appreciate you agreeing to participate in this experiment. You know, a lot of times we never really know how these events will work out, and I appreciate your being willing to host this and really work us through this first-time event. You know, I have been a champion of public access throughout my career, and I do look for technologies and opportunities that really allows us to reach out and engage the community. As I've traveled around the state, talking with people in coffee hours and other settings, I've heard loud and clear that the people who I want a change in leadership style, and they really feel like they've been disconnected from government and from decision makers. Yeah, I am committed to improving public access and participation, and most importantly, transparency, if I'm elected governor. And I really think that this might be a tool that will allow us to have broader conversations. You know, I have been a big proponent of economic diversification and supporting technology companies. And it really is through these kinds of conversations, I think, that it might give us more insight about the kinds of programs that might support entrepreneurs. Most importantly, it might give us more insight about how we can use this kind of technology to allow us to be more connected, government to be more connected with the people that we represent. So thank you very much for being part of this.
Thank you. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for participating today.